Nina Otazo asks, would you also recommend that our class structure follow this arc, as well as with a narrative arc to make it interesting and engaging? I think you can teach the narrative arc. I'm not sure if I understand the have the class begin as if it is. I'm not sure what the question is exactly, but you can actually teach the narrative arc and give them that, but they don't necessarily have to be thinking about the narrative arc for the free dive. For the free dive, I think just allow them to just put something down on the page. And then the rest of it is shaping it into a narrative arc. But if I'm not understanding the question, I'm happy to hear it again, or if she's in here.
Nina, did you want to follow up with that? You're welcome to put something in the chat if you'd like. And maybe while she's thinking, we could go on to Carrie's question.
Okay. And Carrie asks, do you have any examples of unbalanced fictional writing? I believe there are many examples of unbalanced fictional writing. I'm going to talk probably about films more, just because I'm not sure what everyone has read. Unbalanced fictional writing is, remember before I was talking about sort of the life and the shape. So if it's unbalanced, we're going to imagine going to the movies or really staying home and seeing it on your streaming platform. Okay. After the episode or film, an unbalanced piece that has a lot of life, but not a lot of shape, you're going to be sitting there like, I don't even know what that was about. Something happened. Okay. So if it has a lot of life, but no shape, it's unbalanced towards life or whatever, you're going to be sitting there like, I mean, some of it was interesting, but I don't even know what they were doing. I didn't understand the ending, like what? So that's going to become an issue of clarity. Like you're not the writing that's unbalanced to the life side or to the emotive character side, maybe will have interesting things, but be incomprehensible. Okay. On the other side, if it's unbalanced to the shape side, it's going to have a beginning, middle, and ending, but it's going to be really boring because you're going to be able to predict what happens. Like it's not going to be surprising enough. There's not going to be a lot of, like, in other words, it's the kind of thing where you watch it and you're like, oh, it's okay. Like, I'm not talking about something you've already seen and is well loved and you've seen it a lot of times. I'm talking about that it's new to you, but you can already predict where it's going to go because it just doesn't have enough of the surprising and revealing things that that's something with a lot of emotional life has. And so you're just like, oh, this is what's going to happen. And then it happens and you're like, that was boring. So we want to not take it to the boring place or the totally incomprehensible place. We want to take it to the part where it's like, it has enough shape to be clear and comprehensible and enough life to be entertaining, if that makes sense. I hope Pulp Fiction type. I'm just seeing something in the chat about Pulp Fiction.
Yeah. Someone said something about Twin Peaks, which seems like
so those are like, Twin Peaks is like, what? I mean, unless you really like that, but something that is obscure for a reason is fine, but something that is not obscure, like unintentionally obscure, is not good. So, okay. Pam Keel asks about how long would this process take? How many days or classes? So it's really, I think, can be up to you. I would say that this might be a week long. Maybe the first day we do nothing but free dives. And then the next day, maybe select a couple of free dives that you really like and do the second draft with that. The next day after that, the one sentence workshops, a couple of them. After that, maybe doing those final draft things or working on, I think the justification essay, I usually have them write that at home because they're sort of thinking about that on their own. But definitely it can be collaborative with the peer editing and things like that. So that at the end of the week, they have, their final draft, but also each phase of the writing process. So I think about a week. But again, I'm not sure how long you have them, how long your classes are and things like that. But something like that. Mary asked, would you have the students do multiple deep dives and choose their favorites? Yes, absolutely, I would. Mainly because if you have one prompt, maybe you don't connect with that prompt really well, or maybe there's three of them and you're like, oh, I love that. And also because sometimes students like to write what I like to call constellations. They like to write little pieces that can connect to each other, but are not necessarily the same story. So they might have a constellation of flash stories at the end of it, if they really want to do that. This is only for one flash story. They can certainly write more. And then someone says, how I would like to know how pacing and scaffolding would go for ESOL and EL students. I'm sort of wondering, do you mean if they're in the classroom with first language students? I'm not sure.
Yes, that was me. So yes, if they are in the classroom if they're on just like an on level or even an AP classroom, how would you scaffold for them?
I might add in some translation exercises. Like for the free dives, I would almost say, if I'm not sure, what their level would be, but they might want to write it in their own original language, their free dives, and maybe do like a little bit of scaffolding with translating, like maybe a moment to translate that stuff, like whatever they write to English, and then maybe picking things that you feel like will be helpful for them, like what for them, that might be a third draft where it would be like, okay, now let's try to add these specific things. If you're trying to have them meet a different, I'm not sure if I'm addressing this correctly, but if you're trying to have them meet a little bit of a different level, like you just want them to kind of get the language more, is that, or is it just that it'll be harder for them? I'm not
just like EL kids, especially with tenses, past tense, future, present, all that stuff. So like sometimes the story becomes more like a list of and then. So trying to get them to play with and and maybe it is just getting them to use a different tense, or just try something that they're uncomfortable with in English. Maybe I answer my own question.
Actually, no, but this is actually how it works. Like, this is how we start deciding what constraints we want. So maybe like with the one sentence workshop for them, you might ask them, okay, all of the tenses need to be this in these two sentences, or, don't, go through and see how many conjunctions you have, cut out the ones we don't need, something like that. I think that could work for the constraints for the one sentence workshops. And of course you can do more than one sentence workshop during the week. And I think also, like, even that second draft could have the constraint could be something like, make sure that each, write a story in which the sentences are short, or like they don't have and then or whatever thing that you encounter a lot with specific students, if that makes sense. Like, you might have to tailor it just for them, but I think it could be tailored. And it sounds like you are coming up with those ideas, but it's really about what you want to see in that second draft. And certainly, syntax is part of the fictive elements, right? We want to make sure that clarity is there. And I think that will help them. So okay. That sounds great. Michelle asks, will you be discussing the items posted today? The flash fiction? Yes, I will. We'll talk about the flash fiction stories. I think after we do the writing prompt. And then, is the one sentence workshop taken from another source? Some of them are, and they're taken from the source listed on the assignment, which is the writing short form creative writing. It's short form creative writing. It's on there. Yes, they are. Okay.
I unmuted myself so I could ask the question. Basically, I just want to know, did you coin the phrase one sentence workshop?
I did not coin that phrase.
Okay.
This is like the examples. Mm-hmm. Some of the one sentence workshops are mine. Like, I've decided what I want to do for that. But one sentence workshops is kind of it's used a lot in that book, the anthology, but also in other creative writing workshops, I've certainly heard people talk about like sentence workshops and one sentence or one paragraph. So I wouldn't be worried about citing that, but I would also say that that source is a very good source. Here we go, hang on. This is the actual book, and it is cited in the assignment. Oh,
Thank you.
yes, of course. It's really a great one. It's really great.
I dropped it into the chat as well, so the link is there for everybody.
Yeah, it's also on the assignment. I think it's at the bottom of that assignment list is the actual anthology name and stuff like that. But yes, and it's a really great book. I would say maybe think about what workshops you want to use. Some of them may be a little advanced, but maybe not. I don't know. Okay, I think did I get all the questions?
You got all the ones on
on
the first download, and I'll try to help you with the other ones. So the next one I see, I think we have about 5 more minutes, so we're good.
Okay.
I saw a question from Spradlin, and there's 2 parts to it. So let me break it down into the 2 parts. The first question is, what do you do when some students finish a writing task quickly while others take all week to write a few sentences? I always have trouble managing student pacing. And then, do you have any tips for helping students differentiate between writing tasks? Last year, when prepping for the expository essay on the STAR, my students wanted to use conventions from other writing assignments, such as personal narrative and speeches. I found it challenging to teach them how to switch between different types of writing and use the appropriate conventions for each. So 2 pieces. Maybe start with the first, pacing. This is sort of the ESL question in some ways, right?
I think for pacing, I think what you can do is if you have students who just like, I don't know, they get to class ready to just like romp every free write. you can say like, all right, we have 10 options and you only have to get through like 3 this week, right? But if they're really quick, then let them do all 10, right? If they're not really quick, maybe just allow them, the limit can be like, okay, you have to get 3 of them done this week. So that's what we're working on. And again, with these, they're very short. They're not supposed to be super long. If you have students who really want to write a lot, and the constraint says like, if you're writing 5 pages, you've written way too much. So if they've got a lot to say about it, let them write, give them a lot of them. Give them a lot of free dive prompts and so they can select a few that they'd like. But then again, those who are slower, they don't have to actually write. I don't know who would really write 10, but there's probably one kid out there, right? They only have to do maybe 3 that week. And sometimes you might even start with a pre-writing exercise that is like even before, because I think sometimes students have a hard time imagining. I'm not saying that students aren't imaginative, but some students really, they are very nervous. So you might, bring a picture. What do you see? What do you remember about this? Or the artifact that was in the list is certainly a good one for that. You bring the artifact, bring a photo, or use your phone and look at your gram. Something like that, where they can connect to something tangible and begin with memory, or smells. Certain scents can associate, things like that. You can start to kind of get those going and just really allow them to first write down what they remember, for those of them who struggle to kind of get a story down. And as long as they have something on the page, then they can start building on that thing. And we want to kind of do that. So it can be anything like that. Just, what do you see around you? Yes. But again, things that trigger memory are often good places to start digging for stories. So I hope that maybe that will help. Okay, what was the other part?
That's great. The other part was tips for helping students differentiate between writing tasks. So this was a question of, if you're helping them write an expository essay, they use conventions from other writing assignments, such as personal narrative and speeches. How do you get them to switch between different types of writing, or even to understand them, and appropriate conventions for each?
So I think this actually goes with kind of story shapes in a way. This is an issue of rhetoric, right? This is like, sometimes I tell my students, all right, you wouldn't tell your friend a story in the same way that you would tell your grandmother, or on a job interview, or on a first date. You're going to tell it in a different way. So consider those different modes of writing as like, you know, the different outfits you select for different occasions. I mean, I really love outfits, so maybe they wouldn't feel that way. But, you know, if you're going in a job interview, you're going to have to use a specific set of, you know, conventions for language. You need a haircut. You need a nice outfit. They're not going to love you for yourself. They're not your grandma. They don't love you for yourself, right? You may be different at home. You may be different. And so maybe thinking about really giving them those kinds of like, okay, the appropriate use for this is this one. This is why. I think that's usually how I've been able to work with students to teach them the different modes and why they need to not use this one, you know, in the same way that you can't just use the one all the time. Hopefully that helps. I don't know how old they are. They may not be ready to like look for jobs yet. But certainly, you know, the picture for grandma is going to be different than the picture with their friends, right? So anyway, hopefully that helps.
That's great. Elizabeth, I'm looking at our schedule. Do we have time for another question, or should we move to our next stage so we don't get behind?
We have time for a couple more questions.
Excellent. Okay, well, I will then go to the next question from Carrie. Carrie asks, when writing, do you think it is easier for students to create key dialogue moments and build their story around those, or create the narrative first and then fill in the dialogue?
I think it depends on the person, because I've certainly seen both. I've seen students who first hear the dialogue, maybe all they think about is, oh, these characters are saying these things. Like this is something that comes to them. I've also seen students who, you know, very loving descriptions of rocket ships and their launchers first, and then afterwards the characters. So it really depends on what gets them excited. And then I guess the thing with the flash fiction is that you really have to distill it down to like whatever thing is going to speak to them, which is again why the shapes are important and the different elements of fiction are important. So I think it depends on the person. I've certainly seen them respond to, you know, different things. Some people write stories with no dialogue. Some people it's all dialogue. It really depends on that. I mean, they should learn to write dialogue. They may not immediately respond in that way. So maybe one more question? I don't know.
Yes, I think we have time for another question. I was hoping my dog would stop barking, and she did. Or not. How do you teach character development? Also, what if students are wanting to publish their writing?
Oh, great. Excellent. How do you teach character development? Well, first of all, I think you have to kind of give them a little bit about how we do character development in stories. It can be lots of ways. In flash fiction, character development has to be quick, right? And we're not going to have, it's not going to follow like a Dickensian character development where it's like, oh, you know, Pip is this, and then, you know, he meets Miss Havisham and then whatever, and then like 1,100 pages later, something happens, right? Like we need to be, character development is about the small details. So, for example, the letter of complaint, that's a good prompt for character development. Whatever that person is complaining about, how they are complaining about it, the language they use to complain about it, the things that they cite, this is all going to tell you something about who they are, okay? And so I keep talking about grandmothers, but like picture a grandmother. I'm thinking of my mom just because I just went on a trip with my nephews and son, and she was very nervous. So it was not a complaint, but she was really like, just text me when you get there, emoji, because I just learned how, and this and that. And you kind of have to let them know that you're there and let them know this. And you get a character of a person who's very loving, maybe doesn't want to come off as pushy, but really wants to know that they are safe. And also that they learned how to do emojis. So they can talk to you or really talk to them. And so these are the ways in which character can be developed. You can also talk about character development through dialogue, because a piece of dialogue should reveal character, the way that they talk to the other person. It should advance the plot in some way. And it should feel natural to the world that they are inhabiting. And I think the piece Spoiled Clear by Sherry Flick that we'll be looking at also kind of has that sort of dialogue in there that kind of reveals character. So it can be a lot of different things. The way someone dresses, the way they think about things, what they think about. Certainly, there are lots of ways to sort of develop those characters. But again, for flash fiction, we're not looking for like long-term characters. We're not looking for like, well, but does, you know, Gatsby and Daisy and their whole thing and whatever, like it's only like 1,000 words. We just want to see it and see it as a real human being, whatever that is. But we're not putting them through their paces for 1,100 pages. So anyway, hopefully that answers that.
Excellent. One more question maybe.
Okay.
This is, would you recommend storyboarding for ELS?
I think storyboarding would be great for everyone. I actually do now I teach a novel class here at A&M, and we do storyboarding for the novel class. But you can also use it for flash fiction if your flash has a long narrative, or not long narrative, but like has an actual set of events. Yes, you can do the little picture. And for storyboarding, all you have to do is it's a great way to just do like a 1-sentence descriptor of the scene, right? Like, you know, man meets woman at train stop, or, you know, next scene, train, whatever, and he misses her, whatever it is. So it can be great for drawing the picture, and then having 1 sentence, just a concise description of that scene. Storyboarding is great. And I think for publishing, sorry, I think I missed the question about publishing. There's a lot of stuff. I would look at the anthology's best small fictions, best microfiction, because they come out annually. I'm going to put that in the chat. Actually, they come out annually, and at the back of the anthology, you can see all the magazines. So best fictions. Okay, so they're sort of annual anthologies from magazines that, you know, sort of they've culled these stories from magazines and things like that. And you can see what magazines publish small flashes, and you may tell your students about them. Yes.